I am Garrett, 32 years old, and a software engineer from Boston. The Rolex my grandfather Harold gave me was more than just a $30,000 timepiece. It was our connection, our history. Then one day, it vanished from my bag during a family visit. My sister Michelle, the golden child, despite her flaws, avoided eye contact when I asked about it. My parents defended her, like always minimizing my loss. Nobody expected what happened next when Grandpa Harold showed up, clutching a gas can. Before I tell you how my grandfather silenced the room with just a gas can and few choice words, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like button if family betrayal stories strike a chord with you. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts was typical in many ways. Our middle-class home in Lexington had 4 bedrooms, a decent backyard, and a garage where my dad Richard kept his prized tools meticulously organized. My mom Diana worked as an elementary school teacher while Dad managed a local hardware store. We never had luxury, but we never went without necessities either. From an early age, I gravitated toward computers. While other 8-year-old kids were playing soccer or collecting trading cards, I was taking apart our family desktop computer, much to my father's initial dismay. That changed when I successfully reassembled it and made it run faster. My passion for technology was clear, but it rarely earned me the attention or praise that seemed to flow so naturally toward my sister Michelle. Michelle was 2 years younger than me, but seemed to occupy 90% of our parents' attention. When she brought home a participation ribbon from a swim meet, there would be celebration dinners and endless compliments. When I won first place in the state science competition, I received a quick pat on the back and a distracted good job. The pattern was consistent and unmistakable. One incident stands out crystal clear in my memory. When I was 14, I saved up for months from my paper route to buy a specialized graphics card for my computer. The same week, Michelle decided she wanted to try horseback riding lessons. Guess whose savings went untouched, and who had to give up half their money to contribute to Michelle's new hobby? The riding phase lasted exactly 3 weeks before she declared it boring. This was not an isolated incident. Michelle would develop passionate interests in activities ranging from clarinet lessons to pottery classes to competitive cheerleading. Each time my parents would scramble to provide whatever she needed, often at the expense of my own interests or needs. The clarinet gathered dust in her closet after 2 months. The expensive pottery wheel was used twice before becoming a clothing rack in her room. Despite the obvious favoritism, I channeled my frustration into achievements. I maintained a 4.0 GPA throughout high school, earned a scholarship to MIT, and graduated with honors. My parents attended my graduation, of course, but spent most of the time talking about how Michelle was considering transferring to her 3rd college program in 2 years because she just had not found her passion yet. After college, I landed a job at a tech startup in Boston, moved into my own apartment, and began establishing my independence. The physical distance helped ease the emotional burden of my family dynamics, though holiday gatherings and occasional family dinners remained exercises in patience and self-control. Michelle, meanwhile, bounced from job to job, idea to idea. There was the organic skincare line that failed after 3 months, the photography business that never got beyond an expensive camera purchase, the yoga instructor certification that was abandoned halfway through. Each venture ended the same way, with my parents opening their wallets to cover the losses. By the time I turned 30, I had established myself as a senior developer at a successful software company. I had savings, a comfortable condo in a good neighborhood, and a small circle of loyal friends. Michelle, at 28, was still living in our parents' house temporarily after her latest business idea, a subscription box service for pet accessories, had collapsed under the weight of her mismanagement. Throughout all these years, my grandfather Harold remained my steadfast supporter. Dad's father Harold had worked 45 years as a mechanical engineer, retiring with respect, savings, and wisdom that seemed lost on his own son. While my parents fawned over Michelle, Harold would take me fishing, teach me chess, and listen genuinely to my thoughts and ambitions. Harold saw through Michelle's manipulations with crystal clarity. "That girl has never faced a consequence in her life," he once told me during a private moment at a family barbecue. "Your parents think they are helping her, but they are crippling her character." He would occasionally try to speak to my father about the obvious favoritism, but Richard would bristle and change the subject, unwilling to acknowledge any flaws in his parenting approach. The family gatherings followed a predictable pattern. Michelle would dominate conversations with dramatic stories about her latest ventures or problems. My parents would offer sympathy advice and inevitably financial assistance. My accomplishments, promotions, or milestones would receive cursory acknowledgement before the attention swung back to Michelle. Harold would catch my eye across the table, giving me a subtle nod that communicated volumes. I see what is happening here, and it is wrong. Despite everything, I maintained these family connections, perhaps out of habit, perhaps out of hope that something might eventually change. Looking back, I realize I was still seeking the approval and recognition that had been so elusive throughout my childhood. That need for validation from my parents, as misguided as it might have been, kept me coming back to a family dynamic that consistently undervalued me. Little did I know that this carefully maintained family balance was about to be shattered completely, and it would start with a watch, a very special watch that meant the world to me and absolutely nothing to the person who took it. The story of the Rolex begins not with me, but with my grandfather Harold. In his early 20s, fresh out of engineering school and newly married to my grandmother, Elizabeth, Harold landed his first major job at a prestigious engineering firm in Boston. The position represented a significant step up for a young man whose own father had worked in coal mines. After 6 months of proving himself, Harold used his first substantial bonus to purchase a Rolex Submariner, not just as a luxury, but as a symbol of his new professional identity. In those days, Harold told me a man needed one good watch, one good suit, and one good pair of shoes. These were the foundations of professional respect. The Submariner became his daily companion through 45 years of career achievements, from junior engineer to department director. He wore it when my father was born, when he bought his first house, when he received patents for his innovations, and when he eventually retired with honors. My 30th birthday celebration was a small affair, a dinner at my parents' house with just the immediate family. After the obligatory cake and generic presents, shopping gift cards from my parents, chosen with minimal effort, Harold asked me to step outside onto the porch for a private word. The spring evening was mild, with fireflies just beginning to appear in the gathering dusk. Harold removed a wooden box from his jacket pocket. The box itself was beautiful hand-carved walnut with brass hinges that gleamed in the porch light. "I have been waiting for the right time to pass this on," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "You have shown the same qualities I value: responsibility, persistence, integrity. This belongs with you now." Inside the box, nestled on a bed of blue velvet, was his Rolex Submariner. The watch had been recently serviced and restored, the face clean and perfect, the band showing the subtle, dignified wear of decades of use. I was speechless, understanding immediately the significance of this gesture. "This is not just a timepiece," Harold continued, seeing my stunned expression. "It represents our family's journey, from my father in the mines to you in your technology career. 3 generations of men who built something from nothing." The watch was worth approximately $30,000 in pure monetary terms, a vintage Submariner in excellent condition. But its value to me was immeasurable. It represented the only true recognition of my worth that had ever come from my family. While my parents consistently overlooked my achievements in favor of Michelle's drama, Harold had seen me clearly and deemed me worthy of his most prized possession. Through the window, I could see my father's expression as he watched our exchange. His mouth tightened into a thin line of disapproval. Later that evening, I overheard him questioning Harold about his decision. Michelle could have used something valuable like that to help get her business going. He suggested, not even attempting to lower his voice. Harold's response was simple: "The watch goes to someone who understands its value beyond the price tag." Michelle's reaction was predictably self-centered. "I guess watches are a guy thing anyway," she said with forced casualness that barely masked her jealousy. Though I could have totally rocked a vintage Rolex with my business outfits. Within minutes, she had turned the conversation back to her latest venture idea, something involving social media marketing that she explained in vague buzzword-filled terms. My mother Diana, ever the peacekeeper, later suggested that perhaps you could let your sister borrow it for special occasions. The comment revealed how completely she misunderstood both the significance of the gift and the dynamics at play. The watch was not a toy to be passed around. It was a legacy entrusted specifically to me. I established firm boundaries around the watch. It was not available for borrowing. It was not a family community property. It was a specific gift from grandfather to grandson, and I would honor that relationship by being its careful steward. These boundaries were met with eye rolls and comments about being selfish and materialistic from my parents and sister. Over the following 2 years, the watch became a subtle point of tension at family gatherings. Michelle would occasionally make pointed comments about flaunting wealth when I wore it. My father would reminisce about how Harold had promised him the watch years ago, a claim Harold quietly but firmly denied. My mother would sigh and change the subject, her standard approach to any family conflict. Meanwhile, Michelle's financial situation grew increasingly dire. Her latest business failure had left her with significant credit card debt. She had borrowed money from my parents so many times that even they were beginning to show signs of strain. I heard my mother on the phone with her credit card company trying to negotiate payment terms. My father mentioned postponing their long-planned retirement cruise. Yet neither of them seemed capable of saying no to Michelle's next request or suggesting she find steady employment rather than chasing entrepreneurial fantasies. During this period, Harold and I grew even closer. At 82, he remained sharp-minded and physically active, though he had moved from his house to a senior living community after my grandmother passed away. I visited him at least twice a month, often bringing my laptop to show him my latest projects. He took genuine interest in my work, asking insightful questions and offering perspectives from his own engineering background that were surprisingly relevant to modern software development. During one such visit, Harold took the watch from my wrist and showed me how to properly clean and maintain it. "This watch has never missed a day in 50 years because I took care of it," he explained. Things last when you respect them enough to maintain them. Relationships work the same way. I took his words to heart, both about the watch and about life in general. The Rolex became more than just a valuable possession or even a family heirloom. It represented a philosophy of care, continuity, and commitment. Every time I glanced at it on my wrist, I was reminded of Harold's values and the responsibility of carrying them forward. None of us could have predicted how this simple object would become the catalyst for exposing long-buried family tensions and ultimately forcing a painful but necessary reckoning. The hands of the watch were steadily ticking toward a confrontation that would change our family forever. Father's Day fell on a particularly beautiful Sunday in June. The Massachusetts summer was in full bloom with hydrangeas and roses, creating bursts of color around my parents' suburban home. I had driven out from Boston the previous evening, planning to stay overnight to avoid traffic and spend quality time with the family. Despite our complicated dynamics, I made these efforts to maintain connections and honor holidays. The dinner itself followed familiar patterns. My father unwrapped the premium fishing gear I had carefully selected based on hints he had dropped over the past year. His thanks were genuine but brief. Before Michelle presented her gift, a framed collage of family photos she had hastily assembled, several of which were noticeably crooked. This prompted 20 minutes of reminiscing and compliments about her artistic eye. After dinner, I excused myself to freshen up before dessert. The guest room where I had stayed overnight showed subtle signs of disturbance. The overnight bag I had left on the chair appeared to have been moved slightly now, sitting at a different angle. The zipper was not fully closed, though I distinctly remembered securing it that morning. A flash of concern prompted me to check inside. The watch was gone. My first reaction was self-doubt. Had I packed it in a different pocket? Had I left it in the bathroom? Had I somehow forgotten to bring it all together, leaving it on my dresser at home? I methodically searched every inch of the guest room, then the bathroom, then my car. The growing knot in my stomach tightened with each empty location. I returned to the guest room and sat on the edge of the bed trying to organize my thoughts. The watch had definitely been in my bag that morning. I had specifically decided not to wear it for the casual family dinner, placing it in the interior zippered pocket of my overnight bag for safekeeping. Someone had opened that bag and taken the watch. In my parents' house, that left very few possibilities. I decided to approach the situation methodically, speaking to each family member privately before making any accusations. My father was in the garage, organizing his new fishing gear. His genuine absorption in the task and straightforward answers to my casual questions about who had been in the house that day convinced me he was not involved. My mother was equally transparent, expressing immediate concern and helping me search additional rooms of the house. Michelle, however, was nowhere to be found. My mother mentioned she had run out for a quick errand immediately after dinner. This timing raised immediate red flags. I texted her, "Need to talk to you when you get back." Important. Her response came suspiciously quickly. "Might be late." "What's up?" The avoidance was palpable even through text. While waiting for Michelle to return, I found myself drawn to her room. The door was partially open, and I justified my entrance as part of my search for the missing watch. The room was characteristically chaotic. Clothes strewn across furniture, makeup scattered across the vanity, half-empty coffee cups on multiple surfaces. I was about to leave when something caught my eye. In her trash can, the corner of a familiar walnut box protruding from beneath crumpled tissues. My heart sank as I carefully extracted the box. It was unmistakably the custom case for the Rolex, now empty. This was no longer a misplacement or misunderstanding. This was theft from within my family, from the person who had received endless second chances and financial support. I sat in my car in the driveway, needing space to process this betrayal. I texted my friend Marcus, one of the few people who understood the complexities of my family dynamics. "Michelle stole Grandpa's watch. Found the empty box in her room. Parents will probably defend her. What would you do?" His response was immediate and clear. "Document everything. Take photos. Be prepared for denial. Stand your ground." This is not small. This is theft of a family heirloom worth serious money. The gravity of the situation churned in my stomach. This confrontation could permanently alter my family relationships. Yet, allowing the theft to go unaddressed would set a precedent that would poison our interactions forever. Sometimes, the most loving action requires difficult truths. I took photos of the empty watch box and its location in Michelle's room. Then, on a hunch, I checked my parents' home security system. They had installed basic cameras after a series of neighborhood break-ins the previous year. I accessed the footage from my phone and methodically reviewed the morning's recordings. There it was, at 8:43 a.m., while I was helping my father clean the grill on the back patio. The camera captured Michelle entering the guest room. She emerged less than 2 minutes later, clutching something small in her hand, looking furtively down the hallway before hurrying to her own room. The evidence was irrefutable. As the afternoon sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the familiar driveway where I had learned to ride a bike, shoot basketball, and eventually park my first car, I steeled myself for the confrontation to come. The watch represented more than just $30,000. It represented a legacy, a connection to the one family member who had truly seen and valued me. I would not allow that to be discarded for whatever temporary financial fix Michelle was seeking. Michelle's car pulled into the driveway at 7:30 p.m., long after she had promised to return for Father's Day dessert. Her surprised expression upon seeing me waiting on the front steps quickly transformed into defensive hostility. "Why are you stalking me?" I said I would be late. The deflection was immediate and predictable. "We need to talk," I said simply. "Inside with Mom and Dad." Something in my tone must have conveyed the seriousness of the situation, as she did not object or make excuses. Perhaps she knew the charade was about to collapse. Perhaps some part of her was even relieved. As we walked toward the inevitable confrontation, I felt an unexpected calm settle over me. The truth, however, painful, would finally be acknowledged. The real question was whether our family could survive it. The living room had always been the stage for our family's most significant moments. Holiday gift exchanges, college acceptance announcements, heated political debates during election seasons, all had played out against the backdrop of the comfortable but slightly outdated furniture, family photos lining the mantel, and the plies. Large bay window overlooking the front yard. Now it would host, perhaps the most difficult family meeting of our lives. My father sat in his usual recliner. My mother perched on the edge of the sofa, both looking puzzled by my request for a family discussion. Michelle stood near the doorway, arms crossed defensively, eyes darting between family members and potential escape routes. I had decided on a direct approach, free of accusations or emotional outbursts. "My grandfather's Rolex is missing from my bag." I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I've searched everywhere. The security camera shows Michelle entering my room this morning while I was helping Dad with the grill. I found the empty watch box in her trash can. The brief silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. My father's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. My mother's hand went to her throat in her characteristic gesture of distress. Michelle's face flushed red, then drained of color entirely. "That is ridiculous," Michelle finally sputtered. "I was looking for a phone charger. I did not take anything from your room." The denial was automatic but lacked conviction. When I silently held up my phone, displaying the security footage, her strategy pivoted instantly. "Fine. I borrowed it," she admitted, her tone suggesting this was a perfectly reasonable action. "I have an investor meeting tomorrow for my new business concept. I needed to look successful. I was going to return it right after." The borrowing excuse was as transparent as it was predictable. "Where is it now?" I asked simply. Her hesitation told me everything. "It is safe," she hedged, avoiding eye contact. "With a friend." My father finally spoke, his tone already taking on the defensive quality I had anticipated. "If she says she borrowed it and will return it, I am sure that is exactly what happened. You two need to communicate better, but this seems like a simple misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding," I countered calmly. "Taking something valuable without permission is not borrowing. It is theft. And I doubt it is with a friend." My mother intervened with her practiced peacemaker approach. "Garrett, honey, I know the watch means a lot to you, but family is more important than possessions. Michelle made a mistake in not asking first, but your reaction seems extreme. She said she will return it." The conversation was following the exact script I had predicted, with my parents already positioning themselves as Michelle's defenders, despite clear evidence of wrongdoing. I decided to force the issue. "I will call the police and report it stolen unless Michelle tells us exactly where the watch is right now," I stated firmly. The threat of outside authorities entering our carefully maintained family fiction triggered immediate panic. Michelle burst into tears, a tactic that had served her well throughout her life. "I needed money," she sobbed. "The investment fell through. The credit card companies were threatening legal action. I pawned it, but I can get it back. I just need a few days." The admission hung heavy in the air. Even my father seemed momentarily stunned by the escalation from borrowing to pawning. My mother moved immediately to Michelle's side, putting an arm around her shoulders as though she were the victim in this scenario. "Which pawn shop?" I demanded. "How much did they give you?" Between theatrical sobs, Michelle revealed she had received $8,000 for a watch worth nearly 4 times that amount. The pawn shop was in a neighboring town, specifically chosen because it was far from our usual haunts. The transaction had happened immediately after she took the watch. Rather than focusing on the theft, my father's response was bewildering. $8,000. That is highway robbery. That watch is worth much more. As if the problem was that she had been underpaid for stolen property, not that she had stolen it in the first place. "Richard," my mother interjected, "this is clearly a cry for help. Michelle must be in serious financial trouble to have done this." Again, the concern flowed toward Michelle, transforming her from perpetrator to victim in the family narrative. "I will go to the pawn shop tomorrow and recover my property," I stated firmly, "and Michelle will repay me the redemption cost." My father's expression hardened. "Your sister does not have that kind of money right now. You know that. You have a good job savings. This watch, frankly, I never understood why Harold gave it to you instead of keeping it in the direct family line anyway. It seems to me the simplest solution is for you to pay to get it back and consider it a loan to your sister." The phrase direct family line hit like a physical blow, implying I was somehow less family than Michelle. It revealed the underlying current that had always run through our family dynamics. I was the less important child, the one expected to accommodate, to give way to sacrifice. "It is just a watch." My father continued, doubling down. "Is it really worth damaging your relationship with your sister, with all of us?" "Just a watch," I echoed incredulously. "It is a $30,000 family heirloom given to me by Grandpa Harold. It represents his life's work, his legacy. And Michelle pawned it for gambling debts or whatever financial hole she has dug herself into this time." Michelle's head snapped up at the mention of gambling, confirming my suspicion before she could deny it. My mother noticed too, her expression flickering briefly with genuine concern before resettling into her enabling pattern. "We are family," my mother pleaded. "We need to help each other through difficult times. Michelle made a mistake, but surely we can find a solution that does not involve police or permanent rifts." "I have been helping," I responded, my calm facade finally cracking. "I have watched you both drain your retirement savings to fund one failed venture after another. I have stayed silent through years of her manipulation and your enabling. But this crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed." The argument escalated with my father, suggesting I was being selfish for not sharing my good fortune, my mother crying about family loyalty, and Michelle alternating between tearful apologies and subtle jabs about how I had always had it easier than her. The gaslighting and emotional manipulation were familiar patterns, but the stakes had never been this high. "If you push this," my father finally threatened, "you may find yourself cut off from this family. Is that what you want?" The ultimatum hung in the air, revealing the true nature of our family's conditional love. In desperation, I stepped onto the porch and made a phone call to the one person who had always seen the situation clearly. "Grandpa," I said, when Harold answered, my voice finally breaking. "Michelle stole and pawned your watch. Mom and Dad are defending her. They are making it my fault for not understanding her financial troubles." Harold's response was immediate and resolute. "I will be there in 20 minutes. Do not let anyone leave." As I returned to the living room, the argument resumed with renewed intensity. My father accused me of running to Harold like a child. My mother begged me to consider how this would affect Michelle's fragile emotional state. Michelle herself had moved on to suggesting that perhaps the watch should have been shared among siblings from the beginning. None of them had any idea what was about to walk through the front door. The argument had reached a fever pitch. My father had abandoned any pretense of impartiality, fully embracing his role as Michelle's defender, despite the irrefutable evidence of her theft. $8,000, he calculated aloud, as if working through a reasonable business transaction. "You could pay that to recover the watch, and Michelle could repay you half over time when she gets back on her feet. That seems like a fair compromise." The suggestion that I should bear the financial burden of recovering my own stolen property and then receive only partial repayment at some indefinite future date was so absurd, it momentarily left me speechless. Michelle, sensing an opportunity in my silence, quickly endorsed the plan. "I can definitely pay back $4,000 once my new business idea takes off," she offered already, mentally reducing her responsibility. "This is not a negotiation," I finally responded. "This is not a misunderstanding to be resolved with a compromise. This is theft of a family heirloom from your own son and brother." My mother, always uncomfortable with direct conflict, tried yet another deflection. "People make mistakes when they are desperate, Garrett. Your sister has been under tremendous pressure with her financial situation. We need to be compassionate." Where was this compassion when I worked 3 jobs to pay for college expenses my scholarship did not cover? I countered. Where was this understanding when I needed a co-signer for my first apartment lease, and you refused because you had just guaranteed Michelle's loan for her failed skincare line? The direct reference to their long-standing pattern of favoritism struck a nerve. My father rose from his recliner, his face flushed with anger. "That is enough. You have always been jealous of our relationship with your sister. You have always had everything come easy to you. School, career, finances. Michelle struggles in ways you never had to. If you cannot find it in your heart to help your sister through a difficult time, perhaps you should reconsider your place in this family." The threat was no longer veiled. The message was crystal clear. Choose between recovering my stolen property or maintaining my family relationships. It was emotional blackmail of the highest order. "I will not be manipulated into accepting theft as some form of family loyalty test," I stated firmly. "The watch returns to me in full, with acknowledgement of the wrong done, or I file a police report tonight." The tension in the room had become almost unbearable when the doorbell rang. The sudden interruption startled everyone. My mother moved automatically to answer it, perhaps grateful for any distraction from the painful confrontation. Harold stood on the doorstep, his 82-year-old frame straight and dignified despite his age. In his right hand, he carried a red metal gas can. His expression was calm, but carried an intensity that immediately commanded attention. Without waiting for an invitation, he stepped past my startled mother into the foyer. "Harold," my father began, his tone a mixture of surprise and annoyance. "This is a family matter that does not concern." "I am family," Harold interrupted, his voice quiet but carrying a steel that silenced the room instantly. "And this absolutely concerns me." He placed the gas can deliberately on the coffee table at the center of the living room. The incongruity of the utilitarian object among the family photos and decorative coasters created an immediate visual disruption. Every eye in the room was drawn to it. "Michelle," Harold addressed my sister, directly bypassing my parents entirely. "Tell me exactly what happened to my watch." Something about Harold's presence, his unwavering gaze, his calm authority, or perhaps the mysterious gas can on the table, shattered Michelle's practiced defenses. "I took it from Garrett's bag," she admitted, her voice small. "I pawned it for $8,000 to cover some debts." "Gambling debts?" Harold asked directly. Michelle's eyes widened in surprise at his accuracy. "How did you—" "Because this is not the first time," Harold stated. "When you were 22, several valuable items disappeared from your parents' home jewelry electronics. Richard and Diana believed it was neighborhood break-ins. I suspected otherwise but kept my peace. When you were 25, Elizabeth's silver service vanished just after you visited our home. Again, I remained silent for the sake of family harmony. That ends today." My parents looked stunned. This was clearly the first time they were hearing these suspicions. My father started to object, but Harold raised his hand, commanding silence with the simple gesture. "Richard," Harold turned to my father, his own son. "You and Diana have failed both your children. You failed Michelle by shielding her from consequences, until she never developed the character to face them herself. You failed Garrett by consistently devaluing his achievements and dismissing his legitimate concerns. Today, you were prepared to sacrifice his inheritance to perpetuate this destructive pattern." The blunt assessment hung in the air. My mother had tears streaming down her face. My father looked as though he had been physically struck. Michelle sat frozen, her usual manipulative tactics useless in the face of Harold's clear-sighted evaluation. Harold placed his hand on the gas can. "Do you know what this contains?" he asked the room. No one spoke. "This contains our family legacy, the respect and integrity that took generations to build. I brought it because I am prepared to burn it all down, rather than watch it be corrupted by dishonesty and favoritism." The metaphor was powerful, and Harold let it sink in before continuing. The watch was never just about its monetary value. It represented continuity, responsibility, earned success. I gave it to Garrett because he embodies those qualities. The fact that you would defend its theft, Richard, tells me you have lost sight of what truly matters. My father, unused to being on the receiving end of such direct criticism, attempted to recover his authority. "Dad, with all due respect, you do not understand Michelle's struggles. She needs our support, not condemnation." "Support is not the same as enabling," Harold replied evenly. "Real support builds strength of character. What you have given Michelle is a crutch that has left her unable to stand on her own. And in the process you have taught Garrett that his boundaries do not matter, that his property and feelings are secondary to his sister's whims." He turned to Michelle. "You will come with me tomorrow to the pawn shop. You will recover the watch with money I will provide as a loan to you, not your parents. You will sign a repayment agreement with actual consequences for default. And you will apologize to your brother, not for making a mistake, but for committing a deliberate act of theft against a family member who has never done you harm." The directness of Harold's approach left no room for the usual family dance of excuses, deflections, and enabling. My mother attempted one last defense. "Harold, she needs professional help, not punishment." Diana, Harold said gently, "Consequences are not punishment. They are the natural result of actions. Without them, there is no growth, no learning, no development of character. I am offering Michelle something you and Richard have consistently denied her, the chance to take responsibility and restore her integrity." He picked up the gas can. "I am prepared to sever ties with any family member who continues to perpetuate this destructive dynamic. The choice is yours. Address this honestly and completely, or watch our family relationship burn to ashes." The ultimatum delivered without drama, but with absolute conviction created a profound silence in the room. No one doubted Harold's sincerity. He had lived 82 years as a man of principle. If he said he was prepared to cut ties, he absolutely meant it. Michelle was the first to break. "I am sorry," she said, the words seeming unfamiliar on her tongue, not just for the watch, for everything. The manipulation, the lies, the taking advantage. For perhaps the first time in her adult life, she seemed to be speaking without calculation or performance. My father looked between Harold and Michelle, then to me. Whatever he saw in our faces finally penetrated the defensive wall he had maintained for decades. "I have made mistakes." He admitted the words clearly difficult for him. "With both of you." My mother wiped her tears. "We should have done better," she acknowledged simply. Harold nodded, satisfied with this first step toward honesty. "Tomorrow we begin to make this right," he said. "All of us." As Harold placed his hand on my shoulder, I felt something shift in the family dynamic. The gas can had never contained actual gasoline. It had contained something far more volatile: truth. And Harold had been willing to use it to burn down the falsehoods our family had constructed, even at the risk of destroying relationships in the process. Some fires, it turns out, are necessary to clear the ground for new growth. The next morning dawned with an unusual tension in my parents' house. Breakfast was a silent affair, with Michelle picking at her toast and my parents exchanging uncertain glances. The confrontation had stripped away the comfortable illusions the family had maintained for decades, leaving us in unfamiliar territory without our usual scripts. Harold arrived precisely at 9 a.m. His punctuality, a reflection of his lifelong discipline. He nodded a greeting to everyone, but directed his words to Michelle. "The pawn shop opens at 9:30. We should leave now." The drive to Southbridge Pawn and Loan took 40 minutes, with Harold and Michelle in his car and me following in mine. My parents had wanted to come, but Harold insisted this was something Michelle needed to handle without their protective buffer. She took the action. She needs to take the lead in making it right. The pawn shop was located in a strip mall between a discount shoe store and a vape shop. The interior was brightly lit, but cluttered with glass cases displaying jewelry, electronics, and various collectibles. Musical instruments hung on one wall, power tools on another. The place smelled of dust and disinfectant. The owner, a heavy-set man in his 50s with reading glasses, perched on his nose, recognized Michelle immediately. "Back so soon?" he asked, his tone suggesting he had seen this pattern before: people returning to reclaim hastily pawned treasures. "I need to redeem the Rolex I brought in yesterday," Michelle said, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. The owner's expression changed. "Ah, that piece. I am afraid it is no longer here." My heart sank. Harold's steady gaze never wavered. "Explain," he directed at the owner. "I had a regular customer, a collector of vintage watches. He came in yesterday afternoon, saw the Submariner, and purchased it immediately. Paid cash $12,000. The owner seemed almost apologetic. It is unusual for items to move that quickly, but high-end watches like that, they do not sit on shelves long. $12,000 for a watch worth $30,000. The collector had recognized the value immediately, as had the pawn shop owner, who had likely given Michelle a deliberately low offer, knowing he could flip it for a quick profit. "We need that watch back," I stated firmly. "It is a family heirloom. It was taken without permission." The owner's expression hardened slightly. "I run a legitimate business. I checked ID, had her sign the paperwork, asked all the required questions about ownership. Everything was done by the book." He was already shifting into a defensive posture, protecting himself from any suggestion of wrongdoing. Harold stepped forward. "No one is questioning your business practices," he said, his tone reasonable but authoritative. "We are simply trying to recover a family heirloom of great sentimental value. Perhaps you could contact the buyer. We would be willing to offer a premium to make it worth their while." Something about Harold's dignified approach reached the owner. After a moment's consideration, he nodded. "I cannot give you his contact information, privacy policies, but I can call him myself. No promises, though. This guy is a serious collector. He knows what he bought." While the owner made the call in a back office, Michelle turned to me. "I am truly sorry," she said, and for once her eyes held no calculation or performance. "I did not think about what the watch really meant. I just saw a solution to my immediate problem. What exactly is the problem? I asked. What kind of debts are we talking about? Michelle's explanation confirmed what Harold had suspected. What had started as casual online poker during the pandemic had escalated into a serious gambling addiction. She was $27,000 in debt to credit card companies and online lending platforms, all from trying to win back her initial losses. Why didn't you just ask for help? I wondered aloud, though. I immediately knew the answer. In our family, Michelle had never needed to directly ask for help. It had always been offered and insisted upon before she even had to request it. I was ashamed, she admitted. This felt different from my business failures. This felt like something I couldn't talk my way out of. The pawn shop owner returned before we could continue the conversation. Good news and bad news, he announced. He is willing to sell it back. Bad news is he wants $25,000. He knows what it is worth. The figure hung in the air. Harold didn't hesitate. We will pay it. Outside the shop, Harold outlined his plan. He would provide the money to recover the watch as a loan to Michelle, not a gift. She would sign a formal repayment agreement with specific terms and deadlines. She would seek professional help for her gambling addiction. And most importantly, my parents would not be permitted to intervene in this arrangement or help by paying it off for her. This needs to be your journey back to integrity, Harold told Michelle. If your parents short-circuit that journey by removing the consequences, they will rob you of the growth this situation offers. 3 days later, after Harold's contact at the bank had expedited a significant cash withdrawal and the collector had been paid, the Rolex was returned to my possession. The transaction had been expensive and stressful, but the alternative, losing this connection to Harold and his legacy, would have been incalculable. What followed was perhaps the most difficult but necessary period in our family's history. Harold insisted on a family therapy session, something my parents initially resisted but eventually accepted when presented with the alternative, losing their relationship with both Harold and me. The therapist, a compassionate but no-nonsense woman named Dr. Bennett, created a space where the long-established patterns of our family could be examined and challenged. My father struggled the most with this process, deeply uncomfortable with acknowledging the favoritism that had defined his parenting. My mother wept through much of the first session, repeating that she had only wanted to help without recognizing how her help had enabled dysfunction. Michelle surprisingly embraced the process. Perhaps hitting this rock bottom had provided the wake-up call she had needed for years. She began attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings and found a job as an administrative assistant at a local company. Not glamorous or exciting, but stable and structured. I established clear boundaries with my family for the first time in my life. I would not participate in conversations that dismissed my concerns or minimized Michelle's actions. I would not contribute financially to any more bailouts. I would maintain my relationship with each family member individually, but I would no longer play my assigned role in the family drama. My parents' adjustment was slow and inconsistent. Old habits reasserted themselves regularly, requiring gentle but firm correction. At one point, I overheard my father suggesting to Michelle that perhaps he could help a little with her payments to Harold. I interrupted the conversation and reminded him that circumventing the consequences would only undermine Michelle's progress. But it is so hard watching her struggle, he protested. Growth often is, I replied simply. 1 month after the confrontation, we gathered for a family dinner at a neutral location, a restaurant, rather than anyone's home. The conversation was awkward at times, with long pauses and uncertain territory, but there were also moments of genuine connection that had been rare in our previous interactions. After dinner, Harold asked my father to join him for a walk. They were gone for nearly an hour. When they returned, my father's eyes were red, but he seemed somehow lighter, as though a burden had been set down. Later, Harold told me they had discussed Richard's own upbringing and the patterns he had unconsciously perpetuated with his children. Your father grew up believing love meant solving problems for those you care about, Harold explained. It has taken him a lifetime to understand that sometimes love means allowing people to solve their own problems. As for the watch, it returned to my wrist with new significance. It now represented not just Harold's legacy, but our family's painful but necessary growth. Every time I looked at it, I was reminded of the day truth finally took precedence over comfortable illusions. Michelle made her first repayment to Harold on schedule. It was a small amount compared to the total, but the pride in her eyes when Harold wrote out a receipt was worth more than the money itself. She was perhaps for the first time in her adult life experiencing the dignity that comes from keeping one's word and facing consequences directly. The road ahead would be long and undoubtedly include setbacks. 3 decades of family dynamics do not transform overnight, but a crucial corner had been turned. And it had taken a gas can empty of fuel, but full of metaphorical significance, to ignite the necessary changes. 6 months after what we now referred to, simply as the incident, our family gathered for Christmas at my parents' home. The physical setting was familiar, the same decorated tree in the corner, the same scent of my mother's traditional cinnamon rolls in the air, but the emotional landscape had shifted dramatically. Michelle arrived, not from upstairs, but from her own apartment, a modest 1-bedroom she had rented 3 months earlier. It was her first independent living situation since college, and though she complained good-naturedly about noisy neighbors and appliances that needed updating, there was unmistakable pride in her voice when she mentioned organizing her own space. She had maintained her administrative job, recently earning a small promotion to executive assistant. More importantly, she had not missed a single payment on her loan from Harold, though the total amount remained substantial. Her Gamblers Anonymous sponsor had become a close friend, and she spoke openly about her ongoing recovery journey without the defensiveness or deflection that had characterized her previous discussions of personal challenges. My parents had made progress as well, though their transformation was less dramatic and more inconsistent. My father still occasionally slipped into his old pattern of making excuses for Michelle or offering to solve problems for her. The difference now was that these offers were gently but firmly declined by Michelle herself, often with a knowing glance in my direction. "Dad, I appreciate the thought, but I need to handle this myself," she said, when he suggested helping with her car repair bill. The simple boundary delivered without drama represented enormous growth for both of them. My mother had found unexpected fulfillment in returning to her teaching roots, volunteering at an adult literacy program. "I realized I have been so focused on fixing my children's lives that I neglected my own passions," she told me one evening. "It feels good to help people who actually want my assistance." The Christmas gift exchange reflected our new family dynamic. The presents were more thoughtful and less extravagant. My father gave me a set of vintage engineering books he had found at an estate sale, showing a new appreciation for my technical interests. My mother had framed a childhood drawing she found in the attic, one I had made of a computer I wanted to build someday. Michelle gave each of us handwritten letters expressing specific things she appreciated about our relationship, along with modest gift cards that represented legitimate financial sacrifice on her part. Harold watched these exchanges with quiet satisfaction. At 83, he remained our family's moral compass, though he had gradually stepped back from his role as active interventionist. "Families are living organisms," he told me during a private moment on the porch, the winter air crisp around us. "They can heal themselves, if given the right conditions. Truth, accountability, and genuine love. Not the enabling kind, but the kind that wants the best for each person's character." I wore the Rolex that day, as I did on all significant family occasions. What had once been simply a valuable heirloom had transformed into something far more meaningful, a symbol of our family's painful but necessary transformation. The watch that had nearly torn us apart had ultimately become a catalyst for healing. The most challenging moment came after dinner, when my father asked if we could all gather in the living room. His unusually serious expression caused a momentary tension. The living room had, after all, been the setting for our most difficult family confrontation. "I have been doing a lot of thinking over these past months," he began, visibly uncomfortable but determined, "about the kind of father I have been, the kind of example I have set." He paused, gathering himself. "I realize now that I failed both of you in different ways. Michelle, I thought I was helping you by solving your problems and making excuses for your behavior. Instead, I prevented you from developing the strength you needed. And Garrett," he turned to me, his voice thickening, "I failed to see your worth, to celebrate your achievements, to give you the recognition you deserved. I was so busy focusing on the squeaky wheel that I ignored the steady engine that kept running regardless of attention." The room was silent, as my father, a man who had rarely admitted error in his 64 years, acknowledged his fundamental parenting mistakes. My mother reached for his hand, tears streaming down her face. "We both failed," she added softly. "And we both want to do better." It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't erase decades of hurt or instantly transform our family system. But it was honest, and in that honesty lay the possibility of genuine change. Later that evening, Harold took me aside. "I am proud of you," he said simply. "Standing up for yourself was never going to be easy in this family. It took courage." "I learned it from you," I replied. He smiled, touching the Rolex on my wrist. "This watch has served its purpose more perfectly than I could have imagined. Not as a timepiece, but as a truth-teller." In the months that followed, our family continued its imperfect journey toward healthier dynamics. There were setbacks. Michelle had a gambling relapse that she disclosed immediately rather than hiding. My father occasionally reverted to old patterns of favoritism that required gentle but firm correction. But the trajectory remained positive. The most profound lesson I learned through this ordeal was unexpected. Family loyalty is not about maintaining comfortable illusions or protecting people from consequences. True loyalty demands honesty, even when that honesty creates temporary pain. Sometimes the most loving action we can take is to allow the truth to emerge, even if it threatens to burn everything down. I also learned that self-worth cannot and should not depend on family validation. I had spent decades seeking recognition from my parents, measuring myself through their eyes. The watch had initially seemed like that validation finally achieved, which was partly why its theft had felt so devastating. But through this journey I discovered that my value exists independently of their ability to see it. My grandfather understood this all along. The gas can he brought that day contained no actual fuel, just his willingness to prioritize truth over comfortable falsehood, integrity over artificial harmony. Sometimes we need to be willing to burn it all down, not literally, but to allow destructive patterns to be consumed so that something healthier can grow from the ashes. Today, the Rolex keeps perfect time on my wrist, just as it has for 3 generations. But now, it tells more than time. It tells a story of a family that nearly lost itself to denial and favoritism, but found the courage to face uncomfortable truths. It reminds me that real love sometimes requires difficult confrontations, that family harmony built on dishonesty is no harmony at all, and that integrity once compromised can be restored, but only through the challenging work of accountability. What family lessons have you learned the hard way? Has there been a moment when standing up for yourself changed your family dynamic? Share your story in the comments below. If this account of family transformation resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of difficult growth and hard-won wisdom. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the most painful confrontations lead to the most necessary healing.